Investigating the grave of Dolly Madison, Kevin tampered with the memorial statue and opened a secret passage leading into the crypts below. Before Kevin and his friends could take a look, they were ambushed by secluded valley assassins sent by Michael Rafferty. Because they were inexperienced fighters, Kevin had to protect his lab assistants Kyle and Marcus from harm. But in the chaos of the battle, they were cornered by a group of assassins. Kyle and Marcus started to sweat as 3 assassins circled around them like predators. Their swords glistened in the light of the setting sun, and Kyle and Marcus could hear them snickering under their masks. "You should have stayed in the lab, you little brats. Maybe this cemetery will bury you for a discount since you're about to die in their graveyard." As the assassins closed in, Kyle closed his eyes and shouted, "Kevin, help!" Kyle wasn't usually the type to call for help in any circumstance, but he was wise enough to know that despite having started on his journey to become an expert, his levels were still low, only in the high stages of level 1, and he and Marcus were being surrounded by assassins of at least level 4 powers. Distracted with his own group of assassins, Kevin looked over his shoulder and saw that Kyle and Marcus were in deep trouble. Without flinching, he disengaged his opponent and started running over to them. "Kyle, Marcus, hang on, I'm coming." Just as one of the assassins swept his sword at Kyle, Kevin jumped into the fray and blocked the attack. He retaliated with a swift, sweeping kick that sent the assailant crashing into a nearby tombstone. Meanwhile, Kyle's and Marcus's eyes were wide with shock and fear. Kevin shouted at them, "Stay back!" His voice carried a commanding authority that kept them at a safe distance. The second assassin, undeterred by the fate of the first, surged forward, his blade aimed at Kevin's throat. Kevin parried the attack with a controlled block, the clash of steel echoing through the graveyard. His muscles strained as he pushed back against the assassin, causing him to stumble over his feet as they became caught in his black robes. Giving him no time to recover, Kevin chopped at a pressure point on the assassin's neck, and he instantly dropped, unconscious. The third assassin circled wide, attempting to flank Kevin, who quickly spun around to meet this new threat. With a rapid series of strikes, he broke the assassin's defensive posture. Kevin seized the opportunity. With a roundhouse kick, he disarmed the second assassin and delivered a decisive strike, rendering them incapacitated. Now there was just one assassin left. The final assassin fought with vengeance born of desperation. The assassin realized that Kevin was no ordinary foe. His blades whirled through the air, seeking to find a weakness in Kevin's strong defense. But Kevin remained resolute, his focus unbroken. Finally, he launched a powerful spinning kick that sent the third assassin stumbling backward, causing him to drop his sword. With incredible speed, he lunged at the third assassin and thrust his palm into the assassin's ribcage. As his bones snapped, the final assassin fell to the ground. For the moment, he was not going to threaten Kevin and his companions' lives. Breathing heavily, Kevin turned to face his friends. "Are you guys all right?" he asked. As Kyle and Marcus nodded, their faces were full of awe and gratitude. "Well, this is the most action-packed field work I've ever gone out and done. Does stuff like this happen whenever you leave the lab?" Kevin let a small grin come across his face as he crossed his arms. It's hard to go anywhere these days without running into an assassin or two. Just then, Kyle pointed behind Kevin and shouted, "Kevin, behind you! Look out!" Just before an assassin's blade cut through his shoulder, Kevin spun out of the way and dodged the attack. There were 2 assassins left, the ones Kevin abandoned to rescue Kyle and Marcus. They snickered and sneered under their masks. "You didn't forget about us, did you, Kevin?" Kevin grinned, his heart full of unwavering courage. "To be honest, I thought you guys had fled. If you want, there's still time to do so. Otherwise, you'll end up just like the others." Kevin gestured at the unconscious assassins lying around them. As the first assassin lunged forward, Kevin sidestepped, gracefully dodging the attack and countered with a precise punch that sent the assailant staggering backward. The second assassin, undeterred by their companion's misfortune, attempted a swift and silent strike from behind. But Kevin, ever vigilant, spun with remarkable agility, blocking the incoming attack with his forearm. With a swift, fluid motion, Kevin incapacitated both assailants, leaving them sprawled on the ground. The brief but intense skirmish had ended in his favor. Kevin wiped his hands by clapping them together as if he had just taken out the trash. "Well, all right then," Kevin said with a smile. "Now that playtime is over, why don't you say we go into that crypt and find what we came for, huh?" As they approached the stairs that led down into the crypt, Kevin looked up and noticed the light had changed. The sun had gone down, and the graveyard was illuminated with pale blue moonlight. When Kevin looked up at the moon, he saw that it was deep blue like a glowing sapphire in the night sky. "The blue moon won't last longer than a single night and won't return for another year at least. We have to hurry." Before they went down the stairs, Kevin reached into his satchel and handed Kyle and Marcus a mental precision pill. "Here, take this. It will heighten your senses and help you see in the dark." After everyone swallowed their pills, Kevin led the way into the deep, dark crypt. As they followed the stairs down over 600 feet, the light disappeared behind them and eventually they stepped into a large underground chamber. Creeping vines hung from the ceiling along with ancient candelabras. The walls were lined with torches and coffins, and at the back of the room, there was a large stone door. The colossal stone door was adorned with intricate medieval-looking symbols like crosses, winged angels, bleeding hearts, and astrological animals. Marcus stepped forward, examining the mysterious symbols etched into the door's surface. "These carvings appear to be Freemason symbols," he mused. "They must hold the key to unlocking this door." Kevin stepped forward and traced his fingers over the esoteric symbols, which were divided into several rows. Freemasons were known for their complex symbolism and hidden knowledge. When Kyle examined the symbols on the door, he noticed that, like tiles, they could be removed and rearranged. His eyes lit up when he made the realization. "Look, you guys, we can move and rearrange the symbols." Kevin reached up and took a tile off the door. It depicted an alchemical union of the sun and moon. Looking back at the others, he began to see some similarities between different pairs of tiles, symbolic connections that harken back to the Freemason study of alchemy, astrology, ritual, and initiation. I don't think these symbols are arranged in the correct order," Kevin said. "Perhaps each row should form a sequence that corresponds to a particular part of Freemasonry." Marcus leaned in, his gaze fixed on the symbols. "And maybe the key to unlocking the door lies in creating the correct order within each row." Together they set to work, rearranging the symbols in the first row to decipher the hidden sequence. When Kevin counted that the first row consisted of 12 spots, he was immediately struck with an idea. The 12 spots in the first row might align with the 12 signs of the zodiac. Hand me the tiles with astrological symbols. I know the order. From Aries to Pisces, Kevin lined up the tiles. With the first row successfully rearranged, the stone door showed signs of life. Mysterious mechanisms clicked and whirred in response to their diligent work. But the second row posed a fresh challenge. "This row is different," Kevin remarked. "The symbols here represent various stages in the process of crafting the Philosopher's Stone. The alchemists of the Middle Ages called it their magnum opus. The first step was to start with the prima materia, unrefined earth and stone elements symbolized by the color black." Kevin picked up a black tile and placed it first in the row. Next, the prima materia is washed and boiled again and again to remove impurities. This step was known as albedo and was symbolized by the color white. Kevin placed a white tile beside the black one. Finally, the last step was known as rebedo, which involved heating up the purified prima materia to a red-hot degree in order to finally synthesize the Philosopher's Stone. Kyle's eyes were full of curiosity. Did anyone actually do it? Craft the Philosopher's Stone, I mean. Kevin chuckled. A red stone that granted immortality and possessed the hidden secrets of the universe? I doubt it, Kyle. More than anything, I think these medieval alchemists just had very vivid imaginations. When Kevin placed the red tile, the stone door continued to quake with another round of unlocking mechanisms. They continued their efforts row by row as they rearranged the symbols into the correct sequence, corresponding to various facets of Freemasonry. It was a gradual and painstaking process, each row presenting its own unique set of riddles. Kevin remained focused, keenly aware of any potential traps or concealed dangers. Stay sharp, everyone. We're making headway. Finally, they reached the last row where a single symbol stood out, unlike any other they had encountered. It appeared to be the culmination of their efforts. Kevin observed it closely. This final symbol holds great significance. It could very well be the key to unlocking the door. Kyle, eyes fixed on the enigmatic symbol, suggested, "Perhaps it's not merely a symbol, but a representation of something specific. A concept like enlightenment or spiritual awakening." Kevin stepped closer to the door. Consider this. It might not be solely about knowledge, but also about harnessing the power of light. Taking a deep breath, they adjusted the ancient candelabras, manipulating the shafts of light in the chamber. The rays converged upon the mysterious symbol, casting intricate shadows and creating a ghostly dance of illumination. A profound stillness came over the chamber as they anxiously waited. Then, with a resounding grinding noise, the colossal stone door began to inch open. After rescuing them from a team of assassins, Kevin led Marcus Watford and Kyle Thompson into the crypts, where they came into a large chamber blocked by a colossal stone door. The door was carved with adjustable tiles that had ancient Freemason symbols engraved on them. Once Kevin and the others rearranged the tiles in the correct order, the door finally began to open. As the stone door slowly rolled open, Kevin, Kyle, and Marcus found themselves at the top of another staircase. "How deep do these crypts go?" Kyle asked. Kevin took a brave step forward and said, "Only one way to find out. Come on, let's go." Once everything was on the other side, the colossal stone door slammed shut behind them, sealing the trio inside. Kyle and Marcus looked at each other and gulped. "Well, there goes that way out." Kevin wasn't bothered. "Don't worry. If there's one thing I've learned from going underground in search of precious herbs and artifacts, is that there's usually more than one way out." When they reached the bottom of the stairs, there was another large chamber damp with groundwater. It was dimly lit, the flickering flames of torches revealing another mysterious puzzle that lay ahead. Before them stood an imposing pedestal, its stone surface adorned with an ominous inscription. "Only the seekers of true wisdom may pass, those who have journeyed from fool to magician." Kevin squinted at the inscription, his analytical mind already working on a solution. On the center of the pedestal, there was a spread of stone tiles engraved with the imagery from the tarot. "It's another puzzle. We need to understand these tarot cards to proceed." Marcus nodded, his curiosity heightened as he examined the mysterious stone cards. "I didn't know the Freemasons believed in all this stuff. I thought it was just a fraternity for rich people." Kevin laughed. "These days, it mostly is just a club for rich people, but back when they first started, the Freemasons were obsessed with the occult." The eerie silence weighed heavily upon them as they thought about their next move. Before they continued, Kevin scanned the chamber for any signs of hidden traps. The room was circular, and the stone walls wrapped around them seamlessly, offering no hint of an escape route. What Kevin did see were 8 slots carved into the wall, perfectly spaced from one another, like points on a compass. Kevin scratched his chin, putting things together in his head. "It looks like we have to put the cards into these slots, probably in a specific order." Kyle turned in a circle, observing the slots. But they form a perfect circle, so how do we know which one comes first? He asked. It's simple, Kevin said as he whipped out his phone and opened the Compass app. The cards represent the circle of life from birth to death. In Freemason symbology, this journey is often illustrated as the ticks of a compass, in which we are born in the north, live in the west, south, and east, and then return to the north to die. Kevin turned until the compass pointed north, and then he pointed at the slot in front of him. There, that one is the first, and after that we go clockwise. Marcus took the lead as he carefully picked up the first tarot card. It depicted a cloaked figure holding a lantern standing at a crossroads. This one seems to represent decisions and choices. Kyle nodded, picking up the next card, which showed a wheel with various creatures and symbols. This wheel must suggest cycles and change. Kevin picked up a card near the middle. It was engraved with the image of a young man dressed in a flowery tunic about to step off of a ledge as a dog by his feet barked at him. This is the one we want, Kevin said as he picked it up. It's called the Fool, and it represents birth and new beginnings. When Kevin placed the card in the northern slot, the room rumbled as the pedestal shifted 15 degrees. I think we're onto something, Kyle remarked. Together, they began to study the remaining tarot cards, attempting to discern a pattern or sequence. As they moved from one card to the next, they realized that the symbols and imagery were linked, each card transitioning into the next as if telling a story. Marcus picked up another card, this one depicting a tower being struck by lightning. This card implies sudden chaos or disaster. Place it in the northeastern slot, Kevin said. It represents the innocence of childhood coming to an end. Kyle added to the analysis, selecting a card with an image of a chariot being pulled by black and white sphinxes. I'm not sure what this one's all about, Kyle admitted. Kevin nodded and pointed to another slot. That one is called the chariot. Place it in this slot to the southwest. It symbolizes being swept away on a spiritual journey. As they placed the tarot cards in what they believe were the correct slots, the chamber responded. A faint click echoed through the room and the pedestal shifted each time they placed a card. Seeing a card that had the image of a skeleton on a black horse, Marcus picked it up and admired it. Whoa, this one must symbolize death. Well, that's not a difficult one to place. Marcus took the card to the final slot, believing death to be the obvious answer. When Kevin saw what he was doing, he desperately tried to stop Marcus. No, Marcus, wait! The Freemasons believed rebirth was the final step, not death. But it was too late. By the time Kevin called out, Marcus had already snapped the card in place. Immediately, the room started to rumble and the stone pedestal spun back to its starting position. After a moment or two, the rumbling stopped, but nobody dared to move a muscle. Marcus shrugged. See, it's not so bad. We just have to restart. At least there aren't any booby traps. Just then, after another loud rumble, the ceiling started to slowly lower. Kevin's heart skipped a beat. Quick, we have to complete the circle. There was no time for guessing. As Kyle and Marcus held up cards, Kevin shouted where to place them. The High Priestess, the end result of years of spiritual development, Western slot, now. As Marcus rushed over to do as he said, Kyle held up a card of a throne king with a lion bowing before him. The Emperor, symbolizing the ego and delusions of grandeur, southern slot, go. When Kevin looked up, the ceiling was just a couple of feet above them. After placing a few more cards, finally there was only one slot left. Kevin picked up the death card again and started running toward the final slot. Marcus looked flustered. What are you doing? We already tried the death card and it didn't work. The cards have two forms, upright and inverted. The inverted death card goes last, symbolizing that death is only an illusion. When Kevin flipped the card and slipped it into the slot, it snapped in place and the stone pedestal started shaking. Then the stone pedestal twisted in a circle as it sank into the floor, revealing a spiral staircase that led down below. The ceiling, however, was continuing to drop. It was only a few inches over everyone's heads. Hurry, Kevin shouted. One by one, they rushed down the spiral staircase. Just seconds after Kevin started descending the stairs, he and his team heard the ceiling hit the ground above them with a loud thud.
"Well," Marcus said, "I guess we're not getting out that way either."
Kevin pushed on with great determination. "Come on, we have to be getting close." The spiral staircase was lined with flickering torches. When they reached the bottom, they found themselves in another chamber. This one was much smaller. It was long and narrow like a hallway closed on the other end with short ceilings, and a sequence of pressurized plates carved into the floor. Kyle started to walk carelessly forward, but Kevin threw out his arm and stopped him immediately. "Careful, watch where you step, Kyle." Kevin pointed at the pressurized plates scattered all over the room. Each one was engraved with a different symbol. Kevin sighed. "Well, if this test is anything like the last ones, I'm guessing we have to step on the plates in a specific order." As they examined the plates, they discovered that each symbol seemed to represent a different aspect of the human experience. Some depicted stages of life, while others hinted at emotions and virtues. The challenge was in determining the precise order that would unlock the path forward. With a deep breath, Kevin made the first move. He stepped onto a plate bearing the image of a lamb, symbolic of a child's innocence. The plate lit up faintly, responding to his choice. A sense of relief washed over them, but their journey was far from over. Marcus followed, selecting a plate with the symbol of a rising sun signifying new beginnings. The room remained silent, and the plates ahead awaited their next move. Kyle, his mind in a rush, chose a plate adorned with a pair of clasped hands, symbolizing unity. It, too, responded, and their progress continued. The trio moved forward, guided by the symbols that represented the stages of a well-lived life. The room accepted their choices, and the path ahead gradually lit up as they solved the riddle of the plates. But as they ventured deeper, the crypt grew more complicated, and the symbols were harder to figure out. They found themselves at a crossroads, faced with a choice of symbols that seemed to hold equal significance. Doubt ate at them, and Kyle hesitated before selecting a plate adorned with a heart, representing love. "No life is complete without love, right?" When he stepped on the plate, his choice triggered a gut-wrenching shift in the chamber. The walls trembled and water began to seep in from hidden crevices. Panic surged within him as Kyle realized his mistake and the room started to flood. "I could have sworn I heard in a song somewhere that love is always the answer." Refusing to give in to fear, Kevin swallowed his nerves and began to desperately search for a way out of the rapidly flooding chamber. Descending even deeper into the crypt, Kevin, Kyle, and Marcus found themselves in a circular room with a stone pedestal and a collection of tarot cards spread out on top of it. Matching the cards in a sequence of slots that ran along the walls, Marcus accidentally misplaced one of the cards and the ceiling started to slowly fall. After narrowly escaping, they appeared in a hallway full of pressure-sensitive plates. When Kyle stepped on one in the wrong order, water started to fill the room. Kevin's mind raced as he scanned the chamber, his senses heightened by the growing peril. "Stay calm, everyone," he shouted. "There has to be another way out." With each passing second, the water level crept higher, and their time to escape with their lives grew shorter. As the murky water steadily advanced, desperation fueled their search for another way out. Frantic fingers traced the inscriptions on the walls, seeking hidden levers, buttons, or clues that could lead to their salvation. Kevin's sharp eyes locked onto an intricately carved engraving of a labyrinth, different from the symbols on the plates. He pointed urgently. "Look, there's a labyrinth on the wall. I bet it's some kind of hint." Kyle and Marcus turned their attention to the labyrinth, their hearts pounding in rhythm with the rising water. It wasn't a conventional maze, it had an irregular, swirling pattern. As they examined it more closely, they noticed a small, empty hole near the labyrinth's center. Suddenly, Kevin had an idea. "Maybe we need to find something to fit into the center, a key of some sort." Their hands moved in with great speed as they explored the chamber's every nook and cranny. Time was running out, but hope arrived in the trio's hearts when Kevin's fingers brushed against a hidden button. With a satisfying click, a stone panel slid open. revealing a small, ornate dagger resting within. "Look at that. We're onto something." Kevin wasted no time. He snatched the dagger and placed it in the center of the labyrinth. To their astonishment, it was a perfect fit. When Kevin stabbed it all the way in, the walls shuddered and began to retract, revealing a hidden passage. "This way, guys. Come on, hurry." The water surged faster now, greedily reclaiming the chamber. With the newfound passage as their only hope, they plunged into the narrow corridor, the walls closing in on their heels. They raced against time, their hearts pounding louder than the encroaching water. Finally, they burst into a small chamber, gasping for breath as the stone door slammed shut behind them. The water's relentless advance suddenly came to a stop as it was unable to breach the chamber's threshold. Kevin, Marcus, and Kyle collapsed to the ground, soaked and panting but alive. The chamber was dimly lit by soft, glowing torches. Marcus got up and squeezed the water out of his shirt.
"Well, I sure hope we become honorary Freemasons after this."
Kevin chuckled. "When it comes to tomb raiding, challenges normally come in threes. I doubt there's another one. We must be getting close." At the end of the chamber, there was another flight of stairs, except this time they led up instead of down. When they reached the top of the stairs, they stepped into a shallow chamber that was only 30 or 40 feet underground. There was a perfectly circular hole in the ceiling that connected all the way to the surface. The hole was like a well, but instead of water coming through it, the light of the moon flickered down, casting a ring of light on the damp, muddy floor. When Kevin looked up the shaft, he saw the blue moon creeping by at the edges. Then he pulled out his phone and noted the time. "It's 4 a.m. and the sun will rise soon. Hurry, we don't have very much time." Just then, Marcus called out from the other side of the chamber.
"Hey guys, look at this."
Nestled in the back was a lavish shrine. It was covered with candles, bunches of flowers, and dozens of gold coins. The biggest eye-catcher, though, was an enormous marble statue of a woman in a formal gown. Held in her hands was the moon viewer, the magnifying glass they had come looking for. Kevin marveled at the perfectly sculpted statue. This must be where Dolly Madison is actually buried. I had no idea she was such a high-ranking Freemason. Kyle chuckled. "I bet she wrote more of the Constitution than her husband did." Kevin stepped onto the shrine and reached for the moon viewer, but the second he touched the artifact, they suddenly heard the sound of tumbling rocks. Kevin pulled away immediately. That didn't sound good. When they heard the noise again, Kevin looked over his shoulder and saw one of the walls rumbling. Like a mausoleum, the chamber walls were lined with coffins. Suddenly, one of the coffins burst open and a tall figure slowly stepped out. He was dressed like a medieval knight, with Masonic symbols engraved into his armor. He wielded a massive two-handed sword, and more astonishing than anything else, his skin was rotting away and his eyes were completely white. When he spoke, his voice was deep and raspy.
"I am the guardian of Lady Madison's tomb, tasked with assuring that nobody enters this chamber other than 4th-degree Freemasons. Show me your rings to prove you are part of the order, and then I will return to my slumber."
Out of all of them, Kevin was the only one with a ring, his wedding band. In a desperate attempt to fool the Guardian, he held up the ring and said, "Yes, here is my ring, Guardian. It was custom made. The gold is meant to symbolize the highest enlightenment." The Guardian frowned.
"Do you take me for a fool? You three are obviously not Freemasons. I can always tell, ring or no ring. And as punishment for trespassing, this tomb shall become your final resting place as well."
Kevin shrugged his shoulders with a sigh. I should have known that wouldn't work. The battle commenced with a thunderous clash as Kevin leapt aside to avoid the Guardian's initial strike. After gracefully dodging the attack, Kevin turned over his shoulder and shouted, "Kyle, Marcus, get back. Let me handle this." The Guardian's great sword cleaved through the air with deadly intent, sending shockwaves echoing through the chamber. "Too slow," Kevin taunted, his eyes never leaving his adversary. He lunged forward, a blur of motion, aiming to take advantage of the Guardian's sluggishness. His strikes landed with precision, targeting the creature's rotting joints and brittle bones. The undead guardian roared, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Kevin's spine.
You are unworthy even to set eyes on the tomb of Lady Madison.
Blow after blow, he danced around the beast, delivering powerful strikes and retreating before the great sword could find its mark. But the Guardian was relentless. The Guardian adjusted its tactics, his strikes becoming more unpredictable. One swing grazed Kevin's side, tearing through his clothing and leaving a searing gash. He winced but refused to yield. Their battle intensified as the crypt seemed to close in around them. Kevin's agility allowed him to dodge deadly sweeps of the great sword, but the Guardian's raw strength made each attack a brush with death. Sweat dripped from Kevin's brow, his muscles burning with effort. He knew he couldn't maintain this pace for long. With a quick roll, he put some distance between himself and the undead Guardian, his chest heaving with each breath. Meanwhile, Marcus and Kyle cheered from the sidelines. "Come on, Kevin! You can do it!" Kyle picked up a rock and threw it at the Guardian's head. When the rock bounced off its helmet, the Guardian looked at Kyle and growled. "There's a lot more where that came from." As Kyle threw more and more rocks at the Guardian, it hardly seemed to notice. The Guardian, not harmed by the rocks, advanced, his sword poised for a crushing strike. Kevin had to think fast. He scanned the crypt for any advantage, his eyes falling on a crumbling pillar nearby. With a sudden burst of speed, Kevin dashed toward the pillar, the Guardian's great sword slicing through the air behind him. He reached the pillar just in time, using it as a shield against the oncoming assault. The impact sent shockwaves through the crypt and cracks spiderwebbed across the stone pillar. Kevin strained against the force of the blow, his arms shaking with effort. He couldn't hold out much longer. Calling upon his inner courage and the determination in his heart, Kevin pushed back with all his might, throwing the undead Guardian off balance. The beast stumbled, its grip on the great sword loosening. Now was his chance. Kevin lunged forward, his fists a blur of strikes. He targeted the Guardian's weakened joints, taking advantage of the creature's shaky balance. Bone shattered and the Guardian let out a guttural cry. With one final powerful blow, Kevin overwhelmed the undead Guardian. The monstrous foe crumbled to the ground, defeated and lifeless once more. Breathing heavily, Kevin stood victorious over his fallen enemy. Rest in peace. When Kevin looked through the hole in the ceiling, he saw the full blue moon in the very center, its light falling into the chamber. "We have to act fast. There isn't much time." "Here!" Kyle reached for the moon viewer and tossed it to Kevin. After catching it in his hand, Kevin reached into his satchel and pulled out the piece of paper. Holding it under the moonlight and looking at it through the moon viewer, Kevin's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe what he was seeing appear on the paper. You guys are never going to believe this. Kevin, Kyle, and Marcus breathed heavily in the dry air of the tomb. The bodies of the undead soldiers crumbled at their feet. They had made it through every crazy chamber, tunnel, and puzzle that Dolly Madison's tomb had thrown at them, and were finally about to see if the journey had been worth it. They crowded around the paper Kevin had received for winning the epic clash, which should have told them how to ascend to the upper realm. But as they strained their eyes, the page started to light up with an image. What Kevin had thought was writing was actually more like a painting. And it was one he vaguely recognized, like he had seen it before a long time ago in a museum or a textbook or somewhere else. But there was no time to solve the mystery now. They had to get back out from under this cemetery before another booby trap sprang up and something else attacked them. As quickly as it had appeared, the image faded and Kevin took a moment to lock it into his memory. The shaft of light from the air tunnel in the ceiling in the catacombs had disappeared as the moon moved further across the sky, and they were back in the dark with a blank sheet of paper in their hands. "All right, boys, let's go home." He led the way for Kyle and Marcus back out the way they came, this time with no torch in his hand. It had burnt out when he dropped it in the battle with the undead soldier. There was too much supernatural energy in this place for him to think straight, even with his mental precision pill still working in his brain. Between this tomb adventure and his dive down deep into Tennessee's cave system, Kevin was looking forward to being above ground for the foreseeable future. They surfaced from the side of the marble tomb in the Philadelphia cemetery and picked their way around headstones toward the exit. Dawn was breaking on the horizon, and Kevin remembered his promise to Lily to be home by late morning. "We need to get to the airport," Kevin said, but he didn't hear a response. Instead, he heard a thud and a gasp. Kevin whipped around to find a horrible scene. Marcus was knocked out on the ground, his head bleeding from where he had been thrown into a headstone. Kyle, meanwhile, was in the arms of one last secluded valley assassin who had him in a chokehold, a maniacal grin on his face. Kevin charged at the assassin. How did they miss him in their tomb battle? And jumped, aiming a kick for the man's head, but the fighter anticipated his move and shifted Kyle's body in front of him so that Kyle took the hit. Kevin landed on the ground behind the pair and did a quick scan of his surroundings. Sure that there were no more assassins hiding behind the various stones and tombs, Kevin launched himself up again, jumping into a spin kick to try and get the assassin in the kidneys. But once again, the man was able to fling some part of Kyle in the way, so Kevin just hurt his own protege instead. Kyle was also turning blue in the face, the assassin's chokehold strangling him by the second. Kevin could only think of one thing to do, and he did it. He pulled out the night dagger, took a fraction of a second to center himself, and took in a breath of fresh air to recharge his focus. Then he flung the dagger at the assassin's shoulder. Just as he had hoped, the assassin twisted at the waist to try and make the dagger stick into Kyle rather than himself. But he forgot that his own hand was in front of Kyle's neck, choking him. The dagger planted itself in the back of his hand with a sickening squelch. "Gah!" the assassin cried, retracting his arm and using his free hand to pull the dagger out. Kyle landed in a crumpled heap at his feet, on all fours, coughing and spluttering for breath. Kevin wasted no time in charging the assassin again. The man raised the night dagger, slick with his own blood, at Kevin, but Kevin knew his way around that weapon. He kicked it out of the fighter's hand and got in a good right hook while he was at it. The punch knocked the assassin out cold, and on his way down to the ground, he knocked his head on another tombstone for good measure. Kevin rushed to Marcus's side and checked for a pulse and assessed the damage to his head. He pulled a few pills from his emergency kit and got a few down Marcus's throat, which revived him and stopped the bleeding within a matter of moments. When Marcus came to, Kevin asked him, "Where are you right now?" Marcus blinked at the graves around him. "Hell?" "Philadelphia." "Close enough," Marcus chuckled. Kevin decided if Marcus could joke, he could make it to the airport, so he helped his protege up, and together they pulled up Kyle, who was still croaking out pitiful coughs. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked him, holding a hand to his head while the painkiller effects of the pills took their time sinking in. Kyle just nodded, looking afraid to speak. Kevin clapped him on the shoulder. "Come on, I'll let you get some ice cream for that throat at the airport." Kyle slept for most of the flight back to Chicago. The near-death by strangulation experience had apparently worn him out. Marcus sat with Kevin mostly in silence, but when they began their descent over Lake Michigan, he got up the nerve to ask Kevin a question. "Was it worth it? I mean, we went through a lot down in that tomb and you didn't even keep the moon viewer. Could you read what was on that paper?" Kevin nodded. "I recognized the painting it showed me. Now I just have to figure out why that was the clue. It won't be easy, but I'd say that our trip was entirely worth it. And I couldn't have done it without you two. Thank you for coming." Marcus shook his hand. "My pleasure. I don't know about Kyle, though." They both looked back at the row of seats behind them where a sleeping Kyle was now drooling on the shoulder of an older woman, who looked unsure of how to extract herself from the situation. The bruises on his neck from the chokehold he had been in were turning a dark purple color, and Kevin made a mental note to prepare an ointment to help with the look and swelling. On their way off the plane, Kevin looked down at himself and realized that he and the boys were all covered in mud, their hair slick with sweat, and in Marcus's case, blood. All of that, plus their ripped clothing from the battles and Kyle's bruising, must have been quite a sight to the other passengers. Kevin nodded to the pilot as he deplaned, and even the pilot widened his eyes at Kevin and whispered something to the flight attendants. They all snickered. Kevin ignored them. He sent Kyle and Marcus home to rest up and promised to send Larry around later with some more recovery medicines. He planned to go home himself, but first he had a stop to make. He couldn't resist meeting Lily. The Astronomer Society office was in a neighborhood called Logan Square, far enough from the main part of the city to get a clear view of the night sky and technically on Kevin's way home from the airport out in Rosemont. It was a big stone building in the middle of a park advertised as an observatory and museum, like the kind kids would visit for a 5th grade field trip, or a grandfather would take his grandchildren to on their birthdays. Kevin arrived by 8 a.m. Chicago time and he knocked on the door, uncertain that anyone would be in. But of course, astronomers often had to work at night, so he didn't have to be shocked when a tired-looking man, who had been there since 10 p.m. the night before, answered. "Tours don't start until noon, sorry," he said, closing the door in Kevin's face. But Kevin stuck his foot in the crack and said, "I'm not here for a tour. I want to add a name to your records of significant astronomers." The man grinned and said, "Sorry, bud. We're just a museum with an old dusty telescope. If you're interested in altering the public record, I'd go to the courthouse." Kevin knew this whole song and dance well. Herbalists never just gave away who they were or what they were doing to people they didn't know to also be herbalists. It was a secret sect of society, as Malachi Turner had said. Kevin didn't have any astronomy power to flex for this guy, but he did have a good buzzword to get the man to take him seriously. "I found the moon viewer." That caught the guy's attention. He perked up and looked around past Kevin like he was worried someone might overhear them. "You'd better come inside." Kevin obeyed and stepped into a beautiful small room with a domed ceiling dotted with skylights. The floor was a mosaic of tiles depicting the moon in all her phases, crossing through a sea of constellations. Down one hallway, Kevin could see signs for the observatory tour and laser light shows in the planetarium. But the astronomer brought Kevin down the other hallway, which was lined with doors to private offices. They entered the room at the far end of the hall, which looked much more like a cozy reading room than anything else. Maps of the galaxies hung on the walls alongside tapestries of moon and planetary deities. Busts of Galileo, Da Vinci, Isaac Newton, and a few other faces Kevin didn't recognize flanked the windows on marble pillars. "I'm Devin, by the way. Vice President of the Chicago chapter. Who are you?" They sat together in facing leather armchairs across a coffee table in front of the fireplace. Kevin felt like he was meeting with a college professor during office hours or sitting in the office of a whimsical therapist. "I'm Kevin Williams. I'm not an astronomer, but I'm an herbalist, and I ran into some information that you should know about on my latest quest." Kevin recounted what Malachi had told him regarding Dolly Madison, how she had been an incredible astronomer whose legacy was lost to time because her husband, James Madison, overshadowed her with his work in the founding of America. She was given the moon viewer by a formerly enslaved man who made it to Philadelphia before his death. "Dolly should be in your records. She should be recognized by your society. I had to tell you I couldn't let her memory stay dead," Kevin concluded, relieved to have this off his chest. "So where's the moon viewer?" Devin asked. He didn't seem to have heard anything else since Kevin had mentioned finding it. "I don't have it. I left it with her. It's in Dolly's tomb in Philadelphia." Devin looked like he wanted to throw Kevin in the fire. "What? The most fabled artifact in our history was in your hands and you don't recover it for me?" Kevin was taken aback by the anger. "I don't know you. I just wanted to inform you that one of your greatest women hasn't received her due." Devin stood up and opened the door for Kevin to leave. "Great. Thanks for the info. We'll have to go and recover it ourselves. I appreciate you stopping by." Kevin tried not to rise to Devin's level of anger. The guy had been up all night working, but Kevin had been up all night fighting werewolves and undead armies, so he had every right to be just as moody. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. I mean, look at the state of me. I barely made it out alive and I had help." Devin didn't say anything. Kevin walked out of the office, but he turned back as he was leaving. "Just remember her name, won't you? Send someone to research Dolly Madison. Let her be known." Devin just nodded and closed his office door. Kevin showed himself out of the building and headed home to Lily. Kevin was exhausted. After his night of fighting through Dolly Madison's tomb, he had finally made it back to Chicago and was entering his own home. It felt like he had been away for years, solving the underground puzzles and battling undead armies of protectors. But he had managed to cast the Moonviewer onto the paper he had won in the epic clash, and he was one step closer to ascending to the upper realm. It was still early, and Lily had been sleeping a lot since they found out that she was pregnant. So Kevin snuck in quietly and managed to take a shower and make a pot of coffee before he encountered his mother-in-law, Dorothy. "I don't know why you bothered making a whole pot. Everything you make is garbage," she grumbled, shuffling around the kitchen in her nightgown and slippers, pouring Kevin's fresh pot of coffee into the sink and refilling the machine with water and grounds to make it again. "Good to see you too, Dorothy," Kevin drawled. He had agreed to let his mother-in-law stay at his penthouse apartment with Lily for the duration of the pregnancy, but already he was regretting that choice and thinking of ways to kick her out. On the other hand, Dorothy did treat Lily very well, and Kevin had to travel so much that it was nice to know someone was home looking out for his wife. It was just unfortunate that that caretaker also wanted nothing more than for Lily to be carrying anyone else's baby. "Don't sass me! I can't believe you ran off to God knows where when your wife, your pregnant wife, infected with your lame seed, had to lay in bed miserable with worry, wondering why she had been abandoned in her time of need." Dorothy had the same few lines she liked to use on Kevin, and Kevin just sipped his coffee and let her get them out. He was completely out of energy from the night's events. He hadn't slept in days, and he wasn't about to use the last few ounces of his will fighting a cranky old lady who would never see his side of things. "You know, I've heard of women getting pregnant to trap a man, but you hardly ever see men getting their wives pregnant to trap them. You might be the first," Dorothy grumbled. That made the heat rise in Kevin's face, but Kevin kept his cool. "How is she? Sleeping, I hope?" Kevin said, but before Dorothy could respond, Kevin felt the soft hands of his wife sliding over his shoulders and her arms hugging him from behind. "Just woke up. I feel so dazed. I've slept more this week than in my whole life." Kevin turned around and picked Lily up, spinning her around and kissing her. "Hi, I'm back." He grinned down at her. "You're back. Thank goodness." Lily smiled back, ignoring her mother's sounds of disgust over by the sink. "How are you feeling? Do you need anything? Any cravings yet?" Kevin asked, taking in the sight of his gorgeous wife. He knew it was too early in the pregnancy for her to be showing, but even so, he spent an extra second gazing at her belly, marveling at all that must be happening in there at this very moment. Lily giggled and shook her head. "No cravings yet, except that coffee smells amazing. It's too bad I have to swear off caffeine." Kevin dumped his cup out into the sink. "I'll swear it off with you. We're in this together." Lily hugged him, then finally directed her attention to Dorothy. "Good morning, Mom. How did you sleep?" Dorothy rolled her eyes. "Great, until I woke up to the sound of this oaf breaking in at all hours of the morning." Kevin rolled his eyes right back. "It's nearly 10 a.m., Dorothy. And I wasn't breaking in. This is my home. You're a guest here." Dorothy seethed. "I'd rather be a guest at a roach motel." "That option is still available to you," Kevin grimaced. He turned back to Lily. "What would you like to do today, my love? We can go for a nice brunch somewhere, take a drive up the lakeshore, you name it." "How about you go to work and make some money to provide for this bastard child?" Dorothy sneered, but her heart wasn't in it. Kevin just looked around him at the multi-million-dollar home that they were standing in. "I think I'm good, and our baby isn't a bastard, but thank you as always for your input." "You better watch your tone with me." But before Dorothy could finish her scolding, Lily doubled over and let out a yelp of pain. "Oh!" Kevin and Dorothy rushed to her side. "Are you okay, honey?" They both asked at the same time, catching one another's eyes and looking away with disdain. Lily shut her eyes tight and said, "Yeah, I should be fine," through gritted teeth, but her hands were clenched around her stomach. "I think we should go see a doctor," Kevin decided. "A doctor? She should go to the emergency room," Dorothy protested. Lily waved her hands to get them both to shut up. A doctor sounds good. Let's see Dr. Willow. It's probably nothing but better safe than sorry. Kevin carried Lily to the elevator and the three of them rode down to the garage where they piled into their sedan. You can stay back, Dorothy. I'll handle this, Kevin said as his mother-in-law slid into the back seat, silent as a pit viper. Fat chance. You'll probably forget everything Dr. Willow says. I'm coming, Dorothy insisted, still in her gown and slippers. At least put on some clothes. My dry cleaning should be back there, Kevin groaned. He kept Lily's hand in his the whole drive. The three of them sat in the waiting room, Dorothy now wearing her slippers, a pair of Kevin's slacks that were too tight on her, and a button-down shirt that was too loose, until Dr. Serafina Willow was ready to see them. Kevin hadn't had a chance to speak to Serafina Willow in depth in a long time. He was surprised to learn she had narrowed her practice down to OBGYN, but couldn't be more thrilled that the best doctor in the city, and maybe even the country, would be attending to Lily's needs. Kevin had met Serafina when she was the medical director of Downtown General and had quickly earned her respect by helping revive Gwen Archer, a realtor who was Kevin's longtime friend, who had suddenly collapsed at an event that they were all attending. Dr. Willow entered the examination room hastily. Her concern for Lily was almost as great as Kevin's. I hope you're getting as much bed rest as possible, Lily. That's what I advised you, Dr. Willow told Lily as she started to examine her. Kevin broke in. She's been doing too much. Now she's had some discomfort and we're both worried. Lily explained the hard and sudden cramping she had been experiencing since they'd been in their kitchen that morning. Dr. Willow nodded and felt around Lily's abdomen and asked a few more questions, but in the end, she pulled off her gloves with a satisfied smile. Well, it doesn't sound like anything out of the ordinary. You're in your first trimester. Your body isn't used to having another being at play in it. Strange feelings are normal. Lily nodded. Your body is preparing to make room for the growing baby, and it's pulling and stretching your organs to accommodate. Cramping like this is normal and should go away after an hour or two. You just need to find a comfortable position to sit or lie down in while you work. And don't be afraid of Tylenol. That will be your best friend in these next few months. Now let's talk about lifestyle. How are your stress levels? Lily sort of shrugged, not wanting to give away how hard she had been working or how often she stayed up at night worried about Kevin while he was traveling. Dorothy took the pause before Lily spoke as an opportunity to get a few good jabs in. Her stress is through the roof. This no-good husband of hers is running all over the country for work, sometimes gone a week at a time. She's left running his businesses for him while he's gone, and when he comes back, he won't lift a finger to help her. Kevin turned to Serafina, who looked apprehensive how combative Dorothy had been right out of the gate. That's not entirely true. Yes, I travel for work, but Lily runs her own business, a charity, and is never tasked with my responsibilities. And when I'm home, I spend every free moment at her side. Serafina looked at Lily now, trying to get the truth. Lily nodded. Kevin's right. Mother, you have got to stop being at his throat all the time. I let you back into my life on the condition that you be nice to my husband and stop trying to sell me off to the nearest man with a good name and title. Serafina nodded knowingly. I think I got the picture. Lily, I know you're an important and driven woman, but you need to slow down in every way you can so that you can prioritize your pregnancy. Growing a kid in your body is a full-time job. I just suggest you work from home when possible and get lots of rest. I'm insisting. Try to cut back on your hours where you can. Lily nodded and thanked her for the kind words. Serafina turned on Dorothy and Kevin. And you two need to stop creating stress for Lily and find a way to make peace with each other so that Lily doesn't have to be in the middle of your bickering all the time. It's not healthy for her. Pregnancy or no pregnancy. If you've agreed to work as a family unit for however long that lasts, you need to do so with intention and with patience. For now, I'll write you a prescription to ease the tensions. She scribbled on her notepad, but Kevin interjected. All due respect, Dr. Willow, but if that's just medicine to relax Lily and keep her stress down, I can create a medicine for her in my lab that's tailored to her exact needs. Lily nodded. She always preferred Kevin's medicine to anything else. What you three need is more than just a pill." Serafina ripped the page off her prescription pad and handed it to Kevin. It wasn't for medicine at all. It was for a family therapist. When Lily suffered an intense stomach cramp, Kevin and Dorothy rushed her to the hospital for a checkup. Once they arrived, it didn't take long for Lily's doctor, Serafina Willow, to piece together what the problem was. After seeing Kevin and Dorothy argue, she said that the stress would not be good for Lily and advised them to see a family therapist. When Kevin and Lily returned to their penthouse apartment, Kevin still wasn't sold on the idea of going to therapy. "I don't know, Lily. I'm worried that going to therapy with Dorothy would just make things worse. All she would do is attack me for the entire session." Lily, on the other hand, was more optimistic. "That's what the therapist is there for, Kevin. He'd be a neutral middleman who would allow you and Dorothy to share your thoughts in a calm, safe setting. He wouldn't let her dominate the entire session." Kevin rolled his eyes. "Do you really think Dorothy would just sit there and patiently listen to my side of the story? If you ask me, going to therapy would just pour more fuel onto the fire. She's impossible to reason with." When Kevin turned away, Lily put her hand on his shoulder and gently massaged it. "We don't stand a chance at actually fixing these problems unless we get them out in the open, Kevin. If you won't do it for me, do it for the baby. I don't want them to be born into a family riddled with so much tension." Kevin paused, taking her words to heart. Then he let out a heavy sigh. "Okay, fine. I'll call the therapist and schedule an appointment. I just need you to talk to Dorothy first and make her promise that she'll actually make an effort to resolve things." Lily threw her arms around Kevin and kissed him on the cheek. "Thank you, Kevin. It might be a little awkward at first, but it'll be worth it. You'll see." After Kevin called and scheduled the appointment, Lily looked at him with a bit of hesitation in her eyes. Kevin noticed the change in her mood immediately and asked, "What's wrong, Lily? Are you starting to feel sick again?" Lily shook her head. No, it's not that. I just have something I need to tell you, Kevin, and I hope you won't be mad." Kevin sat down beside her and held her hand. "I would never get mad at you, Lily. You can tell me anything. What is it?" Lily took a breath before laying her cards on the table. "It's Williams Media. I know you left me in charge when you went to DC, but with the charity starting to take off, I don't think I'll have time to run things anymore. I was so busy planning the gala these past few weeks that I haven't really had a chance to check in." Kevin looked at her tenderly and nodded his understanding. "Of course, honey. I understand. Especially with the pregnancy. It would be way too much to handle. I'll step in for a bit and see how things are going. It is my company, after all," he said with a chuckle. Lily smiled. "Thanks for understanding, Kevin. Adriana Wright, who is now president of the board, has been trying to get in touch with me for weeks, but I haven't had any time to meet with her. Maybe you can pay the office a visit and see what's the matter?" Kevin stood up and started putting on his shoes. "Sounds like a plan. It will be nice to drop in and see how everyone's doing. In the meantime, you get some rest, all right? Call me if you need anything." Lily nodded. "I will. See you later, honey. I love you." "I love you too." Kevin kissed her on his way out and then took a private car to the Williams Media Building in downtown Chicago. When he got there, a security guard tried to stop him from entering the building.
"Whoa there, buddy. This is a private building. I'm afraid I can't let you in unless you have an appointment."
Kevin laughed and showed the security guard his ID. "And what if I owned the company? Would I still need an appointment then?" When he realized who Kevin was, the security guard turned beet red with embarrassment.
"Oh gosh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Williams. I didn't realize it was you. Please go right ahead."
When the security guard stepped out of his way, Kevin went inside and took an elevator up to Adriana Wright's office on the 32nd floor. The office was full of posters for movies and TV shows produced by Williams Media. When Kevin stepped inside, Adriana immediately got off the phone. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lau, but I'm going to have to call you back." After hanging up the phone, she looked at Kevin with a smile. Now there's a face I haven't seen in a while. So good of you to stop by, Kevin. How have you been?" Kevin flashed her a thumbs up. "Oh, I can't complain. We just learned that Lily is pregnant, so that's pretty big news." Adriana's eyes lit up with excitement. "Oh, that's amazing, Kevin. Congratulations. Please tell Lily I'm extremely excited for her when you get the chance." Kevin nodded. "Thank you, Adriana. I will. I'm actually going to be stepping back in for her as CEO of the company. She said that you have been trying to get a hold of her about something?" Adriana leaned back in her chair and sighed. "Yes, I have. I'm sorry to tell you this, Kevin, but the company has been in disarray for months. There have been power struggles, vacancies we can't seem to fill, and poor communication between departments. The events planning department is probably in the roughest shape. We've had to cancel 3 concerts in the last 6 weeks." Kevin was shocked. "Enzo Forbes didn't quit, did he? I thought he was one of the best event coordinators in the industry." Adriana fidgeted in her chair, nervous at the mention of Enzo's name. "Oh, you haven't heard. I'm so sorry, Kevin, but Enzo is dead. His body was found by the police and, well, he appears to have been murdered." Kevin's jaw dropped. Murdered? By whom? Adriana shuddered at the thought. "Well, I hate to entertain office gossip, but a lot of people think he was murdered by Dalton for having too much power within the company. After Enzo died, a man named Andre Hernandez took over as events coordinator, and then a few months later, he was murdered as well. Since then, nobody has been interested in the position." Kevin was stumped. Why would Dalton turn against the company like this? That doesn't sound like something he'd do. Adriana shrugged her shoulders. "Like I said, it's just office gossip. I don't know what really happened. All I know for sure is that our events planning department has been in shambles ever since. We have to get to the bottom of this, Kevin, before things get anything worse." Kevin was perplexed. He could hardly believe so much had gone wrong since he stepped away. "Is there anything else you can tell me about this?" Adriana scanned her memory for anything useful. "Not really. Andre Hernandez had been almost too eager to take over Enzo's position after he died. It made us all suspicious. He was willing to take on 2 jobs, and at first I thought he was being helpful, but then I realized that he was trying to grab power. Before we could get to the bottom of the situation, Andre was dead too." Kevin scratched his chin. "Do you think it's possible he was trying to sabotage the company?" Adriana shrugged her shoulders. "Your guess is as good as mine. At this point, not much would surprise me. Either way, we have to get a handle on this." Kevin agreed. "Don't worry. I'll look into this right away. Let me speak with Dalton and then I'll get back to you." Adriana raised her hand and stopped Kevin before he walked out the door. "Just do me a favor and don't tell Dalton you heard from me, please. I'm sure it's just gossip, but just in case, I don't want to end up like Enzo." Kevin nodded before walking away. He called Dalton and asked him to come to the Williams Media Building immediately. When Dalton arrived, they met in a conference room where no one could overhear them. Dalton sat down with a nervous look on his face.
"I came straight away, Kevin. What's the problem? How can I help?"
Kevin chose to be direct with Dalton, foregoing any niceties or small talk. "I just learned that the last 2 event coordinators were murdered, Enzo Forbes and Andre Hernandez. Do you know anything about what happened?" Dalton sighed.
"It's a long story, Kevin. I didn't want to bother you with the details, so I took matters into my own hands."
It sounded like a murder confession, but Kevin knew it had to be more complicated than that. He trusted Dalton enough to know he wouldn't kill anyone without a good reason. "What happened?" he asked. Dalton took a deep breath and prepared to unload his side of the story. When Lily confessed that she was too busy to continue running Williams Media, Kevin took over for her and stopped by the office to see how everything was going. In a meeting with Adriana Wright, the president of the board, Kevin was shocked to learn that the last 2 event coordinators, Enzo Forbes and Andre Hernandez, were both murdered under mysterious circumstances. According to office gossip, Dalton had something to do with it, so Kevin met up with him right away and asked what had happened. Dalton started to speak quickly, so quickly that Kevin had to think at double speed to see if his story made sense.
Well, it all started when Enzo was found dead. For weeks and weeks, I couldn't figure out who did it, but then the answer became clear. When Andre Hernandez got promoted to events coordinator, things started to reveal themselves. He was sabotaging our events, like that concert that ended in disaster because the singers were made to look like they were lip-syncing. I started to become suspicious, and when I looked at Andre's emails, I discovered that he was corresponding with Ethan, plotting to take Williams Media down from the inside. Dalton paused, hesitating to tell the next part of the story. Kevin had to nudge him to keep going. "Then what happened?" he asked. "Then," Dalton said, "I killed him for plotting against you. I didn't leave any evidence, so there's no way for the police to trace it back to me. I did what I thought was best for the company, Kevin. I'm sorry if it wasn't the right choice." Kevin's face was neutral, showing no signs of fear or anger. "I trust you to make these calls, Dalton, but you should still tell me when things like this happen. If Andre was scheming against the company, then he had to be stopped. But if you had told me about this sooner, I could have handled the fallout and the divide it caused within the company." Dalton clenched his fists as a wave of shame and regret passed through his heart. "I'm sorry, Kevin. I'll be more careful in the future." Kevin assuaged Dalton's shame. "It's all right, Dalton. As you said, you were only trying to do what was best for the company, and it sounds like you succeeded. I just have to explain the situation to Adriana and get a new events coordinator installed before it's too late." Dalton knew that he had only told Kevin part of the truth, but it was enough for the time being. There was guilt in Dalton's heart for wrongly thinking that his loyal friend Kevin had betrayed him, and Dalton knew that his actions, partly out of revenge, were wrong. But he had recommitted his allegiances to Kevin in a way that made him a more fiercely loyal friend than ever. Kevin would learn the entire truth someday, but for now, Dalton knew it was best to keep a few secrets inside. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Ethan was welcoming a visitor to his country estate. He stood at the top of his driveway and waved as a private car pulled up and an elderly woman slowly stepped out. "Hello, Mrs. Hernandez. Thank you again for agreeing to meet with me. I can't wait for us to get to know each other." Mrs. Hernandez frowned. She didn't seem as eager to meet Ethan as he was to meet her. "Tell me, do you have any information about my son or not? You better not be wasting my time." Ethan's smile didn't budge as he spoke to Mrs. Hernandez very politely. "I'll tell you everything I know, my dear, but please, let's go inside for some tea first." Ethan led Mrs. Hernandez into the living room and poured her a cup of tea. "So, Mrs. Hernandez." Mrs. Hernandez interrupted him, saying, "Please call me Juanita. Mrs. Hernandez makes me feel old." "Okay then," Ethan continued. "So, Juanita, tell me about this son of yours. Andre was his name, yes?" "What's to tell?" Juanita snorted. "The Chicago police found him by the docks with a hole in his head. The loss has been devastating. He was my favorite son, and he was meant to do so many great things in this world. If I ever meet the person responsible for his death, I'll do a lot worse than a hole in the head, I'll tell you that much." Ethan took a sip of his tea. "I can only imagine the kind of pain that must have put you through, Juanita. Now, before his passing, Andre was an events coordinator for Williams Media, correct?" Juanita nodded. "Yes, that's correct." "What does that have to do with anything?" "Well, stop me if I'm wrong," Ethan said. "But Andre wasn't really loyal to Williams Media, was he? You're the owner of a talent scout company yourself, are you not? And Andre was sent as a corporate spy of sorts, right? To gather inside information, onboard new clients, sabotage business, etc." Juanita set down her cup of tea and glared at Ethan suspiciously. "I have no idea what you're talking about. My Andre would never do anything criminal like that."
Ethan waved his hand as if to say, "Oh, please." "You don't have to worry about me, Juanita. In fact, I probably hate Williams Media more than you do. You can be honest with me, just tell me the truth." Juanita fidgeted in her chair, wondering if she had any reason to trust Ethan. "Why should I tell you anything?" she asked. "I don't even know you. You called and told me you had information about my son, so either tell me what you know or I'm leaving." Ethan rolled his eyes, his polite exterior melting away. "Listen, let's just say that if Andre was there to sabotage the company, then I know exactly who killed him, the CEO Kevin Williams." Juanita looked away in thought as Ethan continued. "He's a terrible, violent man, Juanita. He may not have pulled the trigger, but he certainly made the order to have your son killed. I have my own reasons to hate Kevin, you see, which is why I asked you to come here. I thought that perhaps we could team up to take Kevin down together." Juanita was shocked. "You think they discovered what he was doing and punished him with death?" Ethan smiled. He had Juanita right where he wanted her. "That is exactly what I'm saying, Juanita. He was there to sabotage the company, wasn't he?" Juanita sighed. Now that she knew that she and Ethan were on the same side, she felt comfortable disclosing the secret. "It was his idea," she said. "Our talent agency was losing clients to Williams Media left and right, and one day he came to me and said, 'Mom, I know just what to do. I can go undercover inside Williams Media and ruin them from the inside.'" Juanita pulled out her purse and fetched a photograph of Andre that she carried around with her everywhere. "We all thought that it was a good idea, but nobody thought Andre would end up dead. If you think Kevin Williams is responsible for this, then we have to do something." Ethan grabbed her hand in a fake display of empathy. "I know, Juanita. I know. I've been trying to take down Kevin for years, and to be honest, I need all the help I can get." Juanita made a confused face. "You've been trying to take him down for years. Why not just hire an assassin?" Ethan took another sip of his tea. "Oh, believe me, Juanita, I have. I've hired dozens of them, in fact, but Kevin is no ordinary target. As I'm sure you might know, he's a world-renowned herbalist and a skilled martial artist. So far, all of my assassination attempts have proven useless." Juanita laughed. "Sounds to me like you just haven't been sending the right assassins. I have connections in Miami who can set us up with someone who never fails. They call him the Shadow Cat." Ethan scoffed, offended at the thought that she could do any better. "You're more than welcome to try, Mrs. Hernandez, but I doubt it will work. If we really want to take Kevin down, then we'll have to get more creative than just sending assassins." Juanita frowned. "Well, what did you have in mind?" Ethan wrinkled his eyebrows and narrowed his gaze as hatred and malice filled his cold, dark heart. "The best warrior attacks neither the body nor mind. His heart, Juanita. We attack his heart." Juanita looked puzzled. "As in, we hire a sniper to put a bullet through his heart?" Ethan winced. "No, we attack his wife, Lily. Kevin is too powerful to attack directly, so we kidnap his wife and force him to surrender. He loves her more than anything. It's his biggest weakness." "What's her name?" Juanita asked. "Lily Williams. She runs a charity called the Lily Pad." Ethan groaned. "The vanity she must have to name the foundation after herself is amazing, don't you think?" Juanita's ears perked up. "She runs a charity foundation, huh? I have an old friend who's very connected to that world. Maybe she and Lily could get together for lunch." Ethan's face dropped. "Well, what good would that do?" Juanita snorted, unimpressed that Ethan couldn't piece it together. "If we can get her somewhere away from Kevin, then we can kidnap her. I'm sure my friend will be willing to play along. She doesn't care much for young up-and-coming philanthropists who threaten to replace her." Ethan smiled. "I like the way you think, Juanita." Juanita stood up and started walking back to the door. "Before I bother my friend, though, I'm going to send a few of my own assassins after Kevin. See if I can spare ourselves the trouble of kidnapping." Ethan nodded as he held the door open for her. "If you must. Talk to you soon, Juanita. I'm looking forward to working together. Ethan's smile left his face as soon as Juanita walked through the door. The evil in him grew by leaps and bounds every time he failed to bring down Kevin. This time, Ethan was sure would be the time he succeeded in ruining his cousin Kevin's life. After resuming his role as CEO of Williams Media, Kevin went to the building and learned that Dalton was responsible for killing a corrupt events planner, Andre Hernandez. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan met with Andre's mother, Juanita, and pitched her the idea of getting revenge against Kevin by kidnapping Lily. Eager to avenge her son's death, Juanita agreed. The next day, Kevin, Lily, and Dorothy had their first therapy appointment in the late afternoon. As their car parked in front of the office, Kevin hesitated to get out. "Promise you won't let Dorothy eat me alive?" he asked. Lily smiled and grabbed his arm. "Of course not, Kevin. Try not to think of it as you versus her. We're all on the same team here, trying to pull the family together." Kevin sighed as he stepped out of the car. "I'll believe it when I see it." They walked into the building and took an elevator to the 37th floor where the therapist's office was. When they stepped inside, Dorothy was already there in the waiting room reading a magazine about wellness and mental health. When she saw them, she tossed the magazine aside and glared. "There you are! You're late! Things are already off to a bad start." Lily looked at her watch and grimaced. "We're not late, Mom. We're right on time. The session starts at 3:30. Dorothy wagged her finger condescendingly. "The email said to arrive 15 minutes early. Clearly, Kevin must have missed that part." Kevin groaned. "We're here to solve our problem, Dorothy, not create new ones." Kevin and Lily took a seat while they waited for the therapist to invite them in. There were motivational posters all over the room and little Buddha statues to encourage mindfulness. After a minute or two, the therapist opened the door and welcomed them into his office. "Hello there. You must be Kevin, Dorothy, and Lily. My name is Dr. Morgan. Please come in and have a seat on the couch." Dorothy pushed past Kevin to be the first one inside. After stepping into Dr. Morgan's office, all three of them took a seat on the couch. There were framed degrees on the wall and a bookcase tucked into the corner. Dr. Morgan took a seat opposite them and clasped his hands together with a smile. "So, here we are. As I said, my name is Dr. Morgan, and I have an advanced degree in psychology with an emphasis on couples and families. I understand that you have been experiencing some tension inside the family." Dorothy rolled her eyes. "That's one way to put it. Another way would be to say that Kevin is a terrible husband and is completely unprepared to become a father." Kevin slapped his forehead. "We're not even 5 minutes into the session and you're already blaming everything on me. This is exactly what I said would happen." Trying to remain as neutral as possible, Dr. Morgan's face remained expressionless. "I want you to know that this is a safe place for you to say whatever needs to be said. Let's suspend our judgment and listen to what Dorothy has to say, Kevin. Afterwards, you can tell me how you feel about the matter. Dorothy, please continue. Why is it that you don't think Kevin is prepared to become a father?" Dorothy cleared her throat. "Where to even begin? He's always running off on some crazy adventure. Danger follows him everywhere, and Lily is in danger by just being around him. I don't even feel safe right now, to be honest." Dr. Morgan turned to Kevin. "Tell me about these adventures, Kevin. Are they real or imaginary?" Kevin tried his best to remain calm and composed. "I'm a very busy man, Dr. Morgan. I'm the owner of 2 massive companies and am often away on business. Lily understands this and doesn't judge me for it. In fact, my productivity is one of the things she loves most about me." Dorothy didn't wait for Dr. Morgan's permission to interject. "He's making it sound like all he does is travel to sign papers and attend board meetings. It's much more dangerous business than that, Dr. Morgan. Assassins follow him everywhere.
and Lily has been kidnapped multiple times."
Dr. Morgan scribbled something in his notebook. "Kidnapped, you say? Just what line of work are you in exactly, Mr. Williams?" Kevin was starting to feel more and more defensive. "I'm an herbalist, Dr. Morgan, a very dedicated one. Sometimes my work takes me to dangerous places. I have a lot of enemies who are constantly trying to tear me down. Sometimes when they get really desperate, they go after Lily as a way to get to me, but I always bring her back safe and sound." Dr. Morgan swallowed nervously. "Oh my, this does sound pretty serious. We haven't heard from you, Lily. How do you feel about the matter?" Lily took a deep breath and chose her words carefully. "I understand that Kevin's business dealings can sometimes put us in unusual situations, but that's not what we're here to discuss. I feel perfectly safe with Kevin around to protect me. The real problem is that Dorothy and Kevin don't get along. That's what we're here to solve." Dr. Morgan leaned back in his chair. "Well, if I'm hearing things correctly, it sounds like the reason Dorothy does not approve of Kevin has exactly to do with this danger he put you in." Lily nodded. "Yes, but Kevin isn't going to stop building his empire. I wouldn't want him to. His ambition is one of the things that makes me so attracted to him. If Dorothy wants to be in the baby's life as a grandmother, she has to accept our lifestyle." Dorothy crossed her arms and shook her head. "That is something I cannot do, Lily. As your mother, I cannot bear to see you in danger." Dr. Morgan tapped his pen against his notepad. Well, I think we've stumbled upon the heart of the problem here. Dorothy, do you hear what Lily is saying to you? It sounds like you're trying to create boundaries for her, but nobody is entitled to create boundaries for anyone other than themselves." Dorothy scoffed. "To hell with boundaries! Do you have children, Dr. Morgan?" Dr. Morgan nodded his head. "I have a girl and a boy." "So tell me," Dorothy said, "if your little girl grew up and married someone who put her in danger, would you just stand by and let it happen?" Dr. Morgan tried to remain professional. "I would talk with her about it, Dorothy, which is exactly what we're doing now. I'd like to try a role-playing exercise with you if you don't mind. Kevin, I want you to pretend that you're Dorothy, and Dorothy, I want you to pretend that you're Kevin." He looked at Kevin and said, "Now, Dorothy, why don't you explain to Kevin how you're feeling?" Kevin was beginning to think this whole thing was a waste of time, but he played along to make Lily happy. Pretending to be Dorothy, he looked at her and said, "Kevin, I know you love my daughter, but the danger you put her in makes me uncomfortable." Dr. Morgan clapped. "Very good." Then he gestured at Dorothy to continue. Pretending to be Kevin, she said, "Dorothy, I understand how you feel and will file for divorce right away. See? Is that really so hard?" Kevin clenched his fists in anger. "See what I'm dealing with, Dr. Morgan? She won't budge an inch." Dr. Morgan rubbed his temples. He was starting to get a headache. "Okay, that didn't go as well as I hoped it would. Let's try something else, shall we? Dreams are often a direct window into the repressed feelings of the inner soul. Have either of you had any dreams lately?" Kevin raised his hand. "Well, I do have this one. It always starts the same way. Lily and I are having a picnic at a beautiful meadow in the woods. We're eating and laughing, and I always feel so happy to be with her. Then an old witch comes out of the woods and starts calling me a little worm. She forces Lily away from me, and I can never rescue her in time." Dr. Morgan scratched his chin and thought, Very interesting. And who or what do you think this old witch symbolizes, Kevin?" Kevin looked over at Dorothy and she looked back at him with a scowl on her face. "Don't you dare say it," she said. "What about you?" Dr. Morgan asked. "Have you had any dreams, Dorothy?" Dorothy nodded. "I have the same nightmare every night. It starts with Lily having dinner with Kevin, and when he gets up for seconds, an assassin breaks in and slits her throat. I bet you don't need a degree in psychology to tell me what that one means, Dr. Morgan?" Dr. Morgan folded his glasses and put them in his shirt pocket. I think we need to have a discussion about all these assassins and kidnapping schemes. Are they real, Dorothy? Or just a bit of imagination you keep obsessing about to hold against Kevin? Just then, glass shattered all over the floor as a hooded figure rappelled in through the window. Dr. Morgan shrieked in terror.
Good God, what is happening?
The hooded figure drew a sword and pointed it at Kevin.
Kevin Williams, it's time for you to answer for the sins of your past.
Huddled on the ground, Dorothy looked over at Dr. Morgan and asked, "Is this real enough for you?" Following the advice of Lily's doctor, Serafina Willow, Kevin, Lily, and Dorothy went in for their first session of family therapy. Shocked by their stories of deadly danger and chaos, the therapist wondered if Kevin and Dorothy were really telling the truth, until an assassin crashed through the window and threatened to kill them all. "Get down!" Kevin shouted as the assassin took his first strike. While Kevin dodged the assassin's blade, Lily, Dorothy, and Dr. Morgan took cover behind the sofa and dropped to the floor. Dorothy looked more angry than frightened. She tugged on Dr. Morgan's arm and said, "See what I'm dealing with?" Dr. Morgan was too shocked to provide any serious analysis.
I could see how multiple instances like this might become a little bit worrying.
Meanwhile, Kevin was battling it out against the assassin. His movements were fluid, and his defense was impenetrable. He met each of the assassin's attacks with a counterattack, a punch or kick to his sensitive joints and pressure points. Kevin could sense the assassin's power base was highly cultivated. He must have been a level 4 or a high level 3 at least, so Kevin knew he had to be cautious. The room echoed with the symphony of combat, the whirlwind of footsteps, the clatter of overturned furniture, and the sound of fists slicing through the air. The assassin, feeling the desperation of the moment, redoubled his efforts. With a burst of rage, he launched a furious assault. His fists blurred, his kicks came with frightening speed, and his blade seemed an extension of his arm.
I have never failed an assassination attempt, Mr. Williams. This one will be no different.
Kevin chuckled. Well, you know what they say. There's a first time for everything. Kevin remained unflinching as the assassin continued his assault. He patiently observed his opponent, waiting for the perfect opportunity. And then, with lightning-quick reflexes, he seized the moment, disarming the assassin and sending the deadly blade skittering across the floor. Fury contorted the assassin's face as he found himself cornered and weaponless. With reckless abandon, he threw himself at Kevin, launching a flurry of brutal punches and kicks.
Give it up, Kevin. Surrender now and I'll make your death quick and painless.
Kevin retaliated with a kick to the assassin's chest. You have it all wrong, sir. If you want to leave this office alive, it's you who must surrender. The kick to his chest sent the assassin crashing against the wall. Just then, he saw Lily hiding behind the couch. Without hesitation, he picked Lily up, pulled out a small dagger from around his waist, and held it up to her throat. His voice dripped with menace.
This is your final warning, Kevin. Surrender or watch her die.
Kevin's heart dropped into his stomach. He understood that his every move had to be extremely precise. One wrong step could cost Lily her life. Don't worry, Lily. I won't let him harm you. Lily struggled to get out of the assassin's grasp but couldn't break free. Give him hell, Kevin. The assassin, his grip on Lily strong and unbreakable, made the first move. His strikes were calculated and deadly. Kevin, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination, parried each blow with expert skill. The fight was no longer a one-on-one duel. It was a dangerous dance, with Lily's life hanging in the balance. Every punch, every kick was a calculated risk. Kevin had to incapacitate his foe without endangering Lily. As the struggle continued, Kevin's movements grew increasingly fluid and precise. He baited the assassin, leading him to overextend to expose a weakness. And then, with a breathtaking burst of speed, Kevin lunged forward. In a blur of motion, he disarmed the assassin and sent him sprawling to the floor. Lily, released from her captor's grip, stumbled back, her breath shaky but safe. The assassin lay defeated, his arrogance shattered. Kevin stood over him, his gaze unwavering. "It's over," Kevin declared, his voice laced with a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. Summoning his last bit of strength, Kevin kicked the assassin out the window, and he fell 37 stories to the ground below, landing with a loud thud. Finally free from danger, Dorothy and Dr. Morgan stood up from behind the sofa. Dorothy crossed her arms and looked at Kevin angrily. "See, Dr. Morgan? Kevin can't go a single day without armed thugs attacking him. My Lily is in constant danger." Dr. Morgan scratched his chin as his heart rate slowly returned to normal.
"It definitely seems like you all have a lot of dysfunction to work through. Why don't we plan on 3 sessions a week?"
That night, the assassination attempt made it onto the news, and Juanita Hernandez, the woman who sent the assassin to avenge her son's death, watched with a frown on her face. She was also talking with someone on the phone. "How can this be?" she asked. "That assassin has never failed an attempt in all of his 30 years in the business. I thought he was the best assassin in the country." Ethan's voice came through the phone.
"I told you, Juanita. Kevin is no ordinary target. If we want to bring him down, we have to go after his wife first."
Juanita gritted her teeth. "Kidnapping is messy, Ethan. If we make a mistake, it could lead Kevin straight to us. It would be much cleaner to take Kevin out directly. Let me talk to another one of my contacts. They might know the person just right for the job."
Ethan groaned. "Don't you want justice for your son, Mrs. Hernandez?"
Juanita scoffed. "Don't you talk to me that way, young man. Of course I want justice for my son, but because it would bring all kinds of unwanted attention, kidnapping is a last resort. This revenge belongs to me, so we do it my way, and that's final." Before Ethan could respond, she hung up the phone and dialed another number. After a few rings, a man's voice answered on the other end.
"Hello?"
"Hello, D'Angelo. It's Mom. I was wondering if you could do me a favor." On the other end of the line, D'Angelo was lifting weights in his private gym. He spoke with Juanita on speakerphone while he continued to work out.
"What's in it for me?"
he asked. Juanita was shocked and appalled. "Is that the way you speak to your mother when she calls and asks for help? Shame on you, D'Angelo." D'Angelo's face was expressionless as he leaned back and started to bench press.
"You only ever call me if you need something, Mom. Let's be honest. I was never your favorite son, but sure, go ahead. Tell me what you need."
Juanita scoffed. "Well, if you want to become my favorite son, now is your chance. I discovered who was responsible for your brother's death, D'Angelo, and we must take our revenge against him. His name is Kevin Williams, and he had your brother killed for sabotaging his media company. I know you're well connected in the world of assassins. I need you to send the best one you know to take down Kevin Williams." D'Angelo sat up on the weightlifting bench and wiped the sweat off his forehead. Unlike his brother, he was never allowed to work for the family business, a talent agency that raked in millions of dollars per year. In and out of jail his whole life, D'Angelo wasn't trusted, but now he thought might be his chance to get in on the action.
"I'll tell you what," he said. "I'll take care of this revenge scheme for you, but in return I want a high-ranking position inside the family business. I'm sick of watching you all get rich from the sidelines."
Juanita paused, wondering if the exchange would be worth it. Finally, she said, "Fine, D'Angelo. If one of your contacts can take down Kevin, I'll give you a job at the talent agency." D'Angelo smiled before taking a huge chug of water.
"Great. Since CEOs spend all of their time sitting at a desk, they're never hard to kill. I can take out Kevin myself."
"No, D'Angelo. Kevin is a very experienced fighter. He killed the last assassin I sent like it was nothing. You can't go after him yourself." Juanita's voice was assertive and stern. To D'Angelo, her words felt like a challenge.
"Fine. I'll see what I can do. I'll call you when it's done."
D'Angelo hung up the phone and started throwing his fist at a punching bag.
"I'll show her," he thought to himself. "When I take out Kevin myself, she'll finally have some respect for me. Maybe then she'll finally love me as much as she loved Andre."
Sweat poured down his face as he bashed the punching bag again and again. The next morning, Kevin and Lily were having breakfast in the kitchen. Lily noticed Kevin was being more quiet than usual and had a bit of a pout on his face. "What's wrong?" she asked. Kevin stirred his yogurt and looked up at her with forlorn eyes. "It's just that our therapy session has been weighing hard on me. Especially with the baby on the way, I can't afford to put you in danger like that anymore." Lily grabbed Kevin's hand and looked at him sympathetically. "Don't blame yourself, Kevin. It's not your fault. Every time something like that has happened, you've rescued me and I've never even gotten a scratch. I'm not afraid of anything." Kevin appreciated her words. "Thanks, Lily. I'll never let anyone hurt you. I promise." Lily smiled. "I know you won't." That afternoon, Kevin left his penthouse apartment to go to the lab. When he summoned his private car, he didn't recognize the driver. "You must be new," he remarked. As Kevin climbed into the car, the man behind the wheel smiled.
"I was just hired this morning. Where can I take you, sir?"
"Williams & Williams Pharmaceuticals, please." The driver nodded.
"Right away, sir."
Kevin didn't know it, but the man who was driving was none other than D'Angelo Hernandez.
"I'll get you there as fast as I can, sir."
After her first assassination attempt failed, Juanita Hernandez called upon her son D'Angelo to use his connections and send another, better assassin after Kevin. Desperate to win his mother's approval, D'Angelo disregarded her warnings about Kevin's skills and decided to go after Kevin himself. The next morning, D'Angelo arrived to pick Kevin up in a private car disguised as his new driver. As D'Angelo drove Kevin downtown, he looked at him through the rearview mirror.
"Any big plans today, sir?"
Kevin looked out the window and smiled. "I'm just stopping by my pharmaceutical company to see how production is coming along, and maybe do some research while I'm at it." D'Angelo cocked an eyebrow.
"So you're the CEO of a media company and a pharmaceutical company, huh? You sound like one of the most powerful men in the country, if not the whole world."
Kevin chuckled. "Oh, I don't look at myself like that. To be honest, I just feel like a regular guy. I may have a lot of money, but I'm really not that different from anyone else." D'Angelo smirked.
"That's not what I heard."
Just then, D'Angelo drove right past the Williams & Williams Pharmaceutical building. Kevin looked perplexed. Excuse me, you just missed my stop. Can you make a U-turn up ahead?" D'Angelo stepped on the gas pedal and the car began to speed up. Weaving between traffic, he was going over 80 miles per hour. Kevin didn't understand. "What are you doing? Slow down, for God's sake. You're going to get someone killed." D'Angelo's lips curled into an evil grin.
"You know, Mr. Williams, the Bible says that it's easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to go to heaven. So when you go to hell, tell them D'Angelo sent you."
As D'Angelo cackled with laughter, he closed the driver's windows and locked the rear doors. Then he opened his door and rolled out of the car as it raced straight toward the side of a building. Kevin had less than 3 seconds until the car would crash. Thinking fast, he lifted his legs and kicked through the moonroof. At the very last second, he jumped through the moonroof and landed on his feet. The next moment, the car crashed into the wall and burst into flames. The pedestrians on the sidewalk were shocked. Thankfully, no one was killed. As the car burned, Kevin heard a loud, angry voice call out from behind.
"You have got to be kidding me. How are you still alive?"
Kevin turned around and saw D'Angelo standing behind him. Unlike Kevin, he was covered in scrapes and bruises from rolling out of the car. Kevin looked back at him with punishing scorn in his eyes. "Another assassin, huh? You must not have heard about the last one who attacked me." D'Angelo clenched his fists. He was turning red with burning hot rage.
"Mark my words, Kevin. I will be the last assassin to ever attack you because this time, I'm going to finish the job."
The clash began with a blur of fists. D'Angelo unleashed a barrage of quick strikes, but Kevin evaded them with swift grace, ducking and sidestepping his every move. Kevin could sense that D'Angelo was an ordinary person who hadn't cultivated his power base. For that reason, Kevin couldn't unleash his full power against D'Angelo and would have to subdue him with basic martial arts. The crowded street was an unpredictable environment. Shoppers and pedestrians watched in disbelief, their smartphones capturing the shocking brawl. Kevin knew he had to end this quickly before innocent bystanders got hurt. D'Angelo pressed on, his attacks relentless.
"You're outmatched, Kevin. Your little heroics won't save you this time."
Kevin, his focus unwavering, blocked a series of punches and countered with a spinning kick that connected with D'Angelo's chest. The assassin staggered but swiftly regained his composure.
"Give it up, Kevin. This isn't going to end well for you."
Kevin threw his head back and laughed. "I doubt that very much. You're even worse at fighting than you are at driving." The fight intensified. Blows landed with precision, but neither was willing to yield. They circled each other, the world around them blurring into nothingness. With each clash, the crowd's anticipation grew. Bystanders whispered awestruck words about the extraordinary spectacle before them. Sensing a momentary lapse in Kevin's defenses, D'Angelo lunged forward. But Kevin anticipated the move, sidestepping and delivering a devastating punch to D'Angelo's abdomen. The assassin gasped for breath, crumpling to the ground. The city street fell into a hushed silence as Kevin stood victorious, his chest heaving with exertion. "Who sent you?" Kevin asked with a direct, commanding voice. D'Angelo coughed up blood as he laughed.
"Like I would ever tell you."
Just then, sirens filled the air as a fleet of police cars and fire trucks arrived on the scene. As the firemen quickly doused the burning car with water, a police officer came up to Kevin with a serious look in his eye. "What's going on here, sir? What happened?" Kevin sighed as he caught his breath. "This man is an assassin who just made an attempt on my life. He needs to be arrested at once." A group of officers handcuffed D'Angelo and forced him into the back of a police car. He resisted them along the way, shouting,
"This isn't over, Kevin. Eventually I will get my revenge."
Kevin looked at the police officers and raised an eyebrow. "Sounds to me like he just incriminated himself, don't you think?" The officer nodded. "Take him downtown, boys." An hour later, Juanita received a phone call just as she was sitting down for lunch. "Hello?"
"Hi, Mom."
Juanita recognized the voice immediately. It was D'Angelo.
"I just got arrested for going after Kevin, and this is my one phone call. Can you please bail me out?"
Juanita groaned and rubbed her temples. She could already feel a headache coming on. "You went after Kevin yourself? What did I tell you, D'Angelo? I told you to send someone professional." D'Angelo gritted his teeth in frustration.
"I am a professional, Mom. I would have beaten him if the police hadn't intervened. 5 more minutes and he would have been mine. If you bail me out, I can go right back after him."
Juanita's voice was sharp. "You will do no such thing. You know what, D'Angelo? Fine. I'll bail you out, but I think I'll let you sit in prison for a few nights first. That way you'll have plenty of time to think about what you've done."
"Wait, Mom, please. I need to get out of here.
Juanita hung up the phone before he could finish it. She took a deep sigh and contemplated what to do next. "Fine," she thought. "If assassins can't get the job done, we'll just kidnap his wife and be done with it." She dialed the number of her old friend, Annabelle Demont, who was very prominent in the world of Chicago philanthropy. After a few rings, Annabelle answered the phone. "Hello?" "Annabelle, dear, it's Juanita. I was hoping you might be able to help me out with something. Tell me, does the name Lily Williams mean anything to you?" Annabelle snorted on the other end of the line. "Well, it's funny you should ask, Juanita, because that girl is really starting to get on my nerves. The Chicago Tribune called her the fresh new face of Chicago philanthropy. True philanthropy shouldn't have a face at all. It should do its good deeds with humility and not expect a round of applause. Lily Williams has taken the opposite approach, parading herself around like some kind of princess. She even named the charity after herself. Can you believe that?" Juanita chuckled. "I'm glad we're both on the same page, Annabelle. You see, I have my own reason to hate Kevin Williams. My son Andre was killed by Kevin, and I'm eager for some revenge." Why don't you say we killed two birds with one stone here? Would you be willing to help me kidnap Lily? Annabelle considered the proposal. Well, I'm all for putting an end to the Williams, but I don't have much kidnapping experience myself. I am part of the Union, though, a faction of fighters and herbalists that have all kinds of experience with things like this. Let me see what I can do. Juanita smiled. Thank you, Annabelle. Let me know when you've heard back from the Union. I'm happy to help however I can. When Annabelle hung up, she dialed Renee Silver, the leader of the Union. Hello, Renee? Long time no see. Any chance you're still interested in taking revenge against Kevin Williams? Annabelle could feel Renee fuming on the other side of the phone. Kevin made us all look like fools the last time we moved against him. I would leap at the opportunity to put him in his place. Tell me, what do you have in mind? Annabelle smiled. I just got off the phone with an old friend of mine, Juanita Hernandez, who also wants revenge on Kevin. It seems like there are a lot of us who would like to see him and his wife ruined. Their power is too great. They have money and now they're trying to use it to buy social standing. So do you want to help us kidnap Lily? Renee laughed with villainous delight. Of course I would. Just tell me when and where, and the Union will make it happen. How about this? Annabelle mused. I'll invite Lily to lunch to get her away from Kevin. I can make it look like I just want to talk about the local charity scene. Then you and the Union can sweep in for the attack. Renee was steadfast. Like I said, just tell me when and where. The next morning, Lily received a letter and eagerly tore it open when she knew it was from Annabelle DeMont. As she quickly glanced over it, a huge smile appeared on her face. Oh my goodness, Annabelle DeMont wants to get lunch with me? She's one of the most generous philanthropists the city has ever seen. I can't wait to meet her.